G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Those of you who saw the video last week titled Place Your Bets have no doubt been waiting on the edge of your seat for the results of the PET scan report, which I collected on Monday after having had to pay the GP $70 cash up front to get to see him, to get him to talk to me. Whereupon I was refunded $39.75 because he doesn't bulk bill anymore. 50 years after Gough Whitlam was elected to get us out of Vietnam and institute federal, free, universal public health care. Yep, you now got to pay for a GP consultation. So anyway, here's what I discovered. Dr. Abdul Rahim Mohd Tahir really knows what he's doing. As I told someone in the comment thread under last week's video, he told me when I presented with advanced stage 4 head, neck and throat cancer, which he said was cancer of the tonsil. Somebody else had said was cancer of the base of the tongue. He said he could offer me a treatment that was intended to be curative with a 90% expectation of success, which to me sounded like excessively optimistic prognostication, because I have nursed throat cancer before, but 40 years ago when things were different. What we would have done back then would be operate within 3 days, and they'd do very aggressive surgery, and the patient would probably never talk again, have difficulty swallowing, have difficulty eating, and then the cancer would come back and they would die anyway after having had very, very compromised quality of life for 6 months to 2 years. So I was pretty scared when I went to this Dr. Tahir. And we began with a PET scan, and after he looked at the biopsy of the tumour on my neck, and after he looked at the PET scan, he designed his treatment protocol, and yeah, this is what's come out of it. Clinical history: base of the tongue, SCC, squamous cell carcinoma, treated with chemoradiotherapy, completed on the 2nd of the 9th, 2022. Progress study. Technique: PET, positron emission tomography, and diagnostic CT, computerized tomography scans with iodinated contrast were obtained from the vertex of the skull down to the thighs following intravenous injection of 140 millibecquerels of F18 FDG, blood, the BSL 5 millimoles per litre. That's blood sugar level, I think. Essentially what they do is they get you to fast for 6 hours after having rested for 48 hours. They give you a 1 hour long injection of radioactive glucose. Glucose is taken up by all cells of the body, but cancer cells are more active. They're metabolizing faster than normal cells, so they take up more glucose, and the only glucose that's there is radioactive. So they take up more radioactivity, and then you put your patient in front of a thing called a gamma camera, which counts radioactivity. So all the hot spots of radioactivity show you where the cancer is. If you can then do that on a rotating sensor, so the patient can go inside the donut, then you can get slices all the way up and down their body of, is there any cancer here? Is there any cancer here? Is there any cancer here? And you look at it perpendicular to the slice. Very clever. CT, computerized tomography, is a very similar trick, only you have an X-ray source and an X-ray receiver. A charged couple device receives the X-rays, you fire a tight beam through them, and then you rotate the beam 360 degrees with the receiver opposite, diametrically opposite, and then the computer regenerates all those numbers of resistance to X-rays and generates a perpendicular flat slice through the patient. So they've done both of these. And the CT scan They've done that with and without iodine injected into your bloodstream, and iodine is radio opaque, so they can actually watch the blood go through the tissues by watching the radio opaque iodine going through. So yeah, it's pretty high tech stuff. I don't know what it costs. Findings: comparison made with a PET scan dated 26th of the 5th, 2020. Primary site: the previous FDG avid thickening involving the right base of the tongue has completely resolved. Lymph nodes: the previous FDG right cervical nodes have significantly reduced in size and are no longer active. The previous FDG avid left axillary nodes are no longer active. Metastatic disease: nil seen. CT of the head and neck: the previous FDG avid thickening involving the base of the tongue and right cervical lymphadenopathy has resolved. No acute or neoplastic intracranial pathology. The salivary glands and thyroid gland appear normal. CT chest: moderate burden of calcified atheromatous disease involving the coronary arteries. Yeah, I'm 61. My father's first heart attack was at 63, and when he was 73, he died. When I was 50, I had a 42-year-old cousin on my father's side had his first heart attack. He's still a meat eater and has a lot of salt on his meat, and he smokes cigarettes and he drinks a lot of booze. I stopped eating meat 35 years ago. I only smoked for 16 years. 10 years, 3-year break, 6 years more. I drink alcohol. He drinks alcohol. So interesting, different genetics. Yeah. So a moderate burden of calcified atheromatous disease involving the coronary arteries. To me, that's not a surprise at all. That's just the family heart attack lurking. Moderate centrilobular pulmonary emphysema. I did say I smoked tobacco for 16 years, and you cannot smoke tobacco without heavily risking emphysema. 16 years of tobacco, moderate centrilobular emphysema. There's a bit of emphysema at the centre of my lungs. Okay, yeah, I can understand that. It doesn't frighten me because I'm no longer smoking tobacco. Haven't done that since 1994. Small hiatus hernia. Small hiatus hernia. That's what my GP said years ago when I had scrub typhus. Did a lot of investigations, including a chest x-ray, said you got a small hiatus hernia. When I was lying on the operating table ready to have a PEG tube, percutaneous enterogastric tube, installed, I mentioned this small hiatus hernia. They gave me a CAT scan pronto instantly, and they said, half your stomach's on the wrong side of your diaphragm. We can't proceed with the operation. Now it's back to being a small hiatus hernia. Different diagnostic machines and different specialists come to different conclusions, apparently. CT of the abdomen and pelvis. Liver, gallbladder, biliary tree, adrenal glands, pancreas, spleen, and portal vein are normal. The urinary tract is normal. Mild colonic diverticulosis. Skeleton. No acute fractures or suspicious bone lesions. Complete metabolic response since 26/5/2022. Dr. Guy O'Connell electronically signed at 3:34 p.m. Thursday, 1st of December 2022. Carbon copy to Dr. Harron. I didn't get off the bloody diagnostic table and get dressed until about 2:30, so that was remarkably fast. 3 cheers for Dr. Abdul Rahim Mohd Tahir. Hip hip hooray, hip hip hooray, hip hip. Yahoo hooray. Thank you very much, Dr. Tahir. You have literally cured me of head, neck and throat cancer. I am deeply impressed and deeply grateful, and perhaps at some stage you might even get around to reading some of the book of poetry I gave you when you finish cooking me head. Because I thought that would only be the right thing to do. Passed out a few of the remaining copies of Bush poems to the people at the Cancer Institute who spent 7 weeks saving my life. One has to give away all of one's best work. It's, my interpretation of how the universe operates. So, now all I have to do is put up with the side effects of being toothless which is really quite unpleasant. Um, and learn to cope with the mechanics of false teeth. And there's a long saga there, and I'm not going to go into it here because this is a good news video. Yahoo, yippee! I've been treated for cancer, and the treatment has worked. It's I've come in the 90% expectation of success side of the equation. You know, for every 9 people like me who go and get treated for head, neck, and throat cancer, and we get treated successfully, there's some poor bugger who goes in there and puts up with all of that inconvenience and side effects and shit, and yeah, they, it doesn't work for them. There's other people who can't cope with the treatment. I was expecting the treatment to be much more arduous and much more miserable and much more painful and much more debilitating than it actually was. A lot of people observed me with evident surprise as I continued to ride the push bike. You know, Tuesdays was the particular day when I could see they were looking at me expecting something different to happen, because Tuesday was the day you'd go over to the chemotherapy ward, get your 70 milligrams of cisplatin for 4 hours, go from there to the radiotherapy and stick your head in a linear accelerator and get cooked for a couple of minutes. And then I'd go and change clothes and get on the push bike and go for a ride. And I could see them watching, week after week, when is this going to stop? Well, it didn't stop. I rode the bike the whole 7 weeks. I did 176 kilometres on it, round and round the parking lot mostly. I only did 160 k's in the first 8 months after buying the bike. I was there at bloody Shearwater Lodge when I hit the 1 year anniversary. So maybe cancer does hate exercise, and maybe riding an e-bike while you're getting treated for cancer is helpful. I'm bloody sure if I had refused the chemotherapy and refused the radiotherapy and just ridden the e-bike, that would not have cured me of cancer. If I'd taken any of the alternative therapy voodoo cures that were suggested to me, and one of the most remarkable cures, and a lot of people said, "Oh, don't eat any sugar because cancer eats sugar." As evidenced by the PET scan, that's not entirely wrong. But as I already knew and the dietitian confirmed, every cell in your body eats bloody glucose and sugar. And if you don't have any in your diet, no carbs at all, you'll just break down your muscle and your fat. And that won't help your cancer. So a lot of people suggested wiping sugar out with no teeth and finding it very hard to eat. Personally, I think letting chocolate go melted in your mouth is a really good way to get calories to stop yourself from losing weight and starving. There is that. The absolute winner for questionable suggestions is old mate, the alternative remedy, alternative energy, alternative meteorology aficionado friend of mine who lives down on the mid-north coast. And he said what I needed to do was get one of them 9-volt DC transistor radio batteries and connect the negative terminal of the battery to my left hand and the positive terminal of the battery to the ground, and my right hand was to be connected to the ground as well. So there was going to be a circuit between planet Earth and me via this battery, and that was going to drive the cancer out of me. I had a pretty good fucking laugh at that one. But on the other hand, what I actually did was I let him stick half a gram of cytotoxic poison mainline up my arms, and I've still got lumpy sore veins from that. It didn't feel too bad at the time, but some of my hair fell out. Most of the hair loss was from the radiation. But when I come home and started to try and handle firewood, I found my skin had turned into like tissue paper. You pick up a bit of firewood and you come away with half a dozen splinters from each piece. You had to wear leather work gloves just to light the fire. And then, Yeah, stick your head in a linear accelerator. Hold still for 6.1 megavolts worth of electrons. 6.1 megavolts of photon equivalent made up of linearly accelerated electrons. And that's a pretty interesting form of quote witchcraft, quote magic, quote voodoo. It's a dramatic last ditch effort. But it's like everything else in oncology. What you're really gonna do is you're gonna subject the patient to some treatment that is, if you kept on going and you gave them enough of it, it'd kill the patient. The idea is to kill the cancer, and then the patient will recover. And because the cancer is made up of cells that are not actually functional, they are mutated cell failures kind of thing. All they're good at is reproducing fast. They don't function, and they have weaknesses that ordinary cells don't. So they occupy space and they consume resources and they generate waste products, and that's all that they do. Therefore, when you give the patient something that will kill them, but you don't quite give them a fatal dose, or maybe you give them more than a fatal dose and you let them sit for an hour or a day, and then you give them the antidote. The idea is that the cancer dies while they've got the really high dose of the cytotoxics, or while the radiation is belting through. You don't sit there and belt the radiation from one direction all the time and cook a tube of meat going all the way through the patient. You move the source of the radiation all the while going around from different points on the sphere, and it's only the very centre where all the radiuses intersect. That little bit gets all the radiation. Everything else gets, you know, half or less of the total dose because it's going in and coming out, but it's not for very long. Right in the centre, gets it all the time. So it's if you're going to have cancer treated and there's no unpleasant side effects, then the treatment's probably not going to work. Now, I'm going to be toothless for the rest of my bloody life, but at least my life didn't finish 2 months ago. Pays your money and you takes your choice, eh? Um, I don't know whether you've noticed, but I've acquired this thing. It's not a goiter. It's not a new tumour. What it is it's subcutaneous perilaryngeal tissue lymphedema. I know that because I got a bit worried about it when it had been happening every day for 5 or 6 weeks. I rang up the Cancer Institute, got to talk to the oncologist's registrar, a young fella called Sean, described it all to him, told him that you could look at a YouTube video and he could see it from the side while I was doing a piece to camera. And I said, I think it's either fat in the subcutaneous space or it's fluid retention because the tumours were in the lymphatic system and the tumours have been killed and therefore they're being replaced by scar tissue or something, and the lymphatic drainage system isn't working right. So I'm getting a lymphatic backflow in all the tissue that was being drained by the submandibular lymph gland, which I can feel it again now. It's back. But the PET scan says it's not active. It's just being a lymph gland. It's not taking up glucose and growing again. So there we go. The tumour has died. The body is still there, and it's coming good. So this is apparently going to happen for months, perhaps years. It occurs to 30 or 40% of people who get their neck heavily irradiated, like I did. And it's not just that it looks silly, although I don't give a shit about that. That's why I haven't tried to shave, because, as I suggested, if I shave it, the beard will never come back. If I don't shave it, maybe it'll come back. And if you look real close around here, there are indications that it might be thinking about coming back. Hasn't fully made up its mind, and it's certainly not doing much over on this side where it got cooked the hardest. But anyway, Think of that as patina. But the funny bit is, this swelling happens at night time. By 10 o'clock tonight, this will have basically drained away, and it'll be looking much more like the skin on this part of my neck, where it's all sort of dry and super sunburned, and there's not much in the way of subcutaneous fat. It's just skin over the top of muscle, and tendon and shit. Here, it feels like the fat underneath the roll of belly fat on someone who's been eating too much for too long. Or a lot of people have rolls of fat on their neck, similar kind of condition. Well, I'm as skinny as a bastard. I'm probably down to about 58 kilos or 60 kilos or something. I should be 70. Um, and I've got this little patch of fat on my neck like a turkey gullet. Anyway, that's not the funniest bit. The funniest bit is that it happens on the inside of my head as well. So when I wake up in the morning, around here is is numb. It's as if you've had an injection of dental anaesthetic. And the dentist says, if your lips are going numb, the swelling's not down here. It's like up here, high up. So okay, fine. There's there's things going on all the way up the bloody jaw, and tissue swelling is putting pressure on dental nerve. Not hurting, but perception of numbness. What's really irritating though is the uvula, the thing that hangs down at the back of your neck, which has a gag reflex on it. If you get horribly hungover and you sleep with your mouth open, that gets really dry and swollen, and the gag reflex gets hypersensitive, and you wake up the morning after with your hangover and you've got the dry heaves, and there's nothing you can do to stop wanting to vomit because your uvula and this gag reflex is swollen, and it's dry on the skin, and it's really, yeah. Well, that's what I wake up to every bloody morning. I've got a swelling. I've got dry heaves for anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 minutes, and sometimes you'll get an hour off and it'll come back. So a lasting side effect, you can call it the purchase price of waking up to live another day, is that I wake up pregnant. I'm a nurse. I wake up swollen, not bleeding, with morning sickness. And after maybe half an hour, it passes, and then I just feel sort of tired and fatigued, and it takes a while to get going in the morning. And it would be truly irritating if I didn't look on the funny side of it and say, well, yeah, okay, I got treated for head cancer and I come out of it toothless and pregnant. And the pregnancy goes away after half an hour every day. What can I say? You got to laugh at it, eh? Shit, I'm starting to rhyme. It must be true. Um, that's usually a good time to end the video, eh? So for all those trolls who were thinking that I was going to be turning my toes up by the summer solstice, don't think it's going to happen unless I go under a bus or something. Um, I don't think the emphysema will knock me off. I think the family heart attack might get me in another 10 or 12 years, perhaps. And as long as I can figure out how to make false teeth work, I have escaped. They've cured me of cancer. And yeah, it only cost me $30 to get the result. Australia's still a bloody good country to get cancer in if you're on a pension. I will lay a bet that it would be a lot worse if I was in America. And as I said when I first got the diagnosis, if I was in Ukraine trying to get this sort of treatment this year for this sort of disease, I would have been up shit creek with a barbed wire paddle, a matchstick for a paddle in a barbed wire canoe, rather. So see, I should have ended the video earlier before I made a mistake. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Still trying to get used to the fact that I'm not rush, 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 hurry, 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 because next week you might be dead, sort of thing. I did bugger all yesterday. I just couldn't get my head around the fact that all the stress and hypertension is, you don't have that anxiety anymore. In a sense, being diagnosed and then successfully treated for a malignancy gives an appreciation of life on a more intense scale than never having had quite such an existential scare. It's a bit like when I hear people complaining about the responsibilities of being a parent. You know, these people say, oh, got kept up late last night because of the kid doing this, or I've got to do this for the kid, or I've got to do that for the kid, boo hoo, sob, sob, you know. What they need is a visit from the state authorities when the state authorities are thinking about taking their kids away from them. If you've ever had the Department of bloody minded fat social workers and men with ponytails come around and want to take your kids off you, then after that, whatever you do to look after your kids, it's a privilege. So in that sense, if I have to get up and vomit for 15 minutes every morning and feel like, this is crazy and look like a pregnant turkey neck, um, with the vestigial remnant of a beard to show you where once upon a time the beard used to be, that's a pretty fair swap, eh? I'm not pushing up daisies, and that is the main thing. So Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Rejoice. Rejoice. I get to see another Christmas. Maybe 10 or 12 more after that. Have a good one. Ciao.